Now, the R&B star R. Kelly has been found guilty of running a decades-long scheme to recruit and traffic women and children for sex. After a jury in New York convicted him on all 9 of the counts he faced. His 6-week trial heard shocking accounts of abuse and of trauma going back more than a quarter of a century, as 11 of his accusers took the stand.
Kelly is accused of videotaping himself having sex with an underage girl.
It is the story of a web of sexual abuse created by one of the world's most famous singers, and the courage of his victims who've finally seen him brought to justice. As the guilty verdict was read out yesterday in a New York courthouse, the man whose voice earned him the nickname the King of R&B was silent.
This conviction would not have been possible without the bravery and resilience of R. Kelly's victims. No one deserves what they experienced at his hands or the threats and harassment they faced in telling the truth.
The singer used his fame and playboy persona to ensnare victims into lives of sexual slavery, subjecting them to perverse and degrading treatment, the details of which are too harrowing to broadcast. Girls, boys and women were trafficked across state lines with the help of his managers, employees and bodyguards.
I was a part of a suicide pact. If he was to go to jail, I was supposed to kill myself.
11 victims took the stand in this trial, but dozens more have spoken out, alleging abuse dating back to the 1990s. Often their stories were dismissed or ignored. Like so many of the other predators exposed in the wake of the Me Too movement, R. Kelly believed himself to be untouchable. Now, as he awaits sentencing next spring, the question is why he was allowed to get away with it for so long.
Thank you, Judge.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to the author Koa Beck, who's the former editor-in-chief of feminist news website Jezebel. I began by asking her why she thinks it's taken decades for the accusations against R. Kelly to get to court.
I think that with respect to my own country and the politics of my own country and the many narratives that are perpetuated in my country about women's rights and sexual harassment, Black girls specifically, and more broadly, Black victims, Black women, Black men, Black non-binary people are not afforded the same narrative of victimhood that is often the default for middle-class victims, for white victims, for straight victims. It's a very common misalignment of who is a victim when there is a predator.
So do you think that essentially white-dominated society was reluctant to accuse a Black man of doing such dastardly things?
I think that's a piece of it, albeit that being the beginning and end, I think is an oversimplification. I think there are a lot of dynamics at play that have to do with, a very prominent Black powerful man not wanting to necessarily be accused or quote unquote taken down by his own community, given that he is such a, or was, I guess would be the better framework now, such a prominent symbol of Black success in my country, particularly within the music industry. But one thing that has always really struck me about this story, particularly as it's been reported over years now in the United States, is that R. Kelly's predatory behavior was an open secret. A lot of people knew this, and there's a lot you can read about how many people knew this, including, many people in his circle, many people who worked for him, many people who bought and sustained his music career.
He was such a huge figure for so long that the impact of this must surely be very big.
I hope so. I remain cautiously optimistic, just in considering the many, again, I think it's important when you consider how somebody like R. Kelly is able to abuse people on this mass scale. It's important to think about this in terms of systems rather than an individual person who you then remove or is convicted or, who goes to prison. I'm very fascinated to see a more holistic understanding of systemic sexual misconduct and harassment being assessed on this scale, where it's not just the person who executed the violation, but the many, many layers of people who facilitated this behavior, who knew, who either didn't do anything and there was an action, or specifically tried to conceal this behavior. That's something to watch.
Koa Beck, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Of course. Thank you so much.